Okay, I think we're good to go. Yeah. Okay, welcome everybody. Welcome to Agile Edinburgh. It's fantastic to see such a huge turnout tonight. I think myself and Scott Logic we got a bit of surprise this morning when we looked at the attendees and saw like 94 and rising. So we had to take some actions, but I think we've got a good crowd here, and we've actually got our reserve here for the extra seating and stuff. So all good. So how many people here are well, in this group here are first timers to Agile Edinburgh? A good number. Yeah, that's good. Well, welcome. Great to see you along. So for those that don't know, Agile Edinburgh has been going since about 2013. We started off as a small band, and I say small, sometimes 4 people, at the Guildford Arms, and a lean coffee about all things lean and agile. And then we grew. We started running, doing some talks like what we're doing tonight, workshops and so on, and we've just grown hugely over the last couple of years. So it's great to see the increased interest in agile and lean. And what we're all about sharing our experiences in agile and networking, and knowledge transfer and sharing and so on. So tonight is a night of talks. We've got 3 short talks and a lightning talk tonight. Before I go into that and a few other announcements, I'm going to pass a big thanks tonight to Scott Logic for hosting tonight, providing the venue, pizza, refreshments, and so a big thanks to Scott Logic for that. And Murray, Scott Logic's going to say a few words about the
Thank you.
venue.
So, I guess, first of all, it is great to see everyone here. So, for those of you who don't know who Scott Logic are, we're a software consultancy. We're actually 12 years old, but it's been 10 and a half years since we first opened our Edinburgh office. So when I joined Scott Logic just over 10 years ago, it would be impossible to imagine that we have all these people here for an event in our recently opened, I guess, 3rd office in Edinburgh. So yeah, 10 years ago there was 5 of us in a converted townhouse just off Gayfield Square. And so yeah, it's very different times. It's great to see everyone. Really pleased. I guess like the theme says, you never know how many folk are going to turn up. I did say we've only got 40 chairs. That'll be fine. So we managed to work it out. The slight delay, I guess, was trying to get the live stream next door, but that seems to be working okay now. So I guess Scott Logic, like I say, software consultancy. When I joined, 5 of us, all developers. We now have roles sort of in a much broader spectrum. So we have UX designers, we have testers, we have project managers, we have business analysts, and I guess even on the development front, the technologies we use are much broader spread. So I'm sure I meant to say at this point we're hiring, but that would be tacky.
You're hiring.
But yeah, we're hiring. Yeah, basically, well, you've got a new office, you have to fill it. So basically, that's what it comes down to. I hope that the venue works for you. This is the first time we've done anything like this, so if you do have any feedback, I would love to hear it. Obviously, we can't do anything about the size of the space, but if you get any sort of things that you think we could do better, we would absolutely love to hear it. They're getting my jokes about 10 times later. So yeah, absolutely. And I guess I'll pass you back to Stephen and just say enjoy the night.
We sometimes at the end of the meetup do a little bit of what we call a shout out, where we talk about some future events going on. I think we're going to do it at the start tonight to get that out of the way, and also for a chance for folk to mingle and ask questions. So, Product Forge, who are live streaming, have a hackathon on the 25th to the 29th of January. It's a public health hackathon. I'm trying to ignore that. Yeah. So if you want any more information for that, go and look at the Product Forge website. Calba, who I'm actually from Calba, we've got an Agile Practical training session on the 11th of December. So interactive introduction to Agile. It's a practical introduction with skills sessions on Scrum, Kanban, estimation and things like that. That's the 11th of December in Edinburgh, so come and see me if anybody's interested in that one. Also, there's a professional Scrum Master course and professional Scrum Developer course running on the 8th and 10th of January next year in Edinburgh also, run by Naked Agility. I don't know if Martin's here tonight. He said he was, but he's not here yet. Anyway, Naked Agility is running that, so you can get more information from them, and they're offering discounts and stuff if you have more members going. I think that's it. We're going to talk about our next meetup at the end, but without any further ado, I think we'll get going with our first talk. So we've got 3 talks in a lightning talk, and here comes our first speaker, who is. So,
do I need the microphone, or are they hearing it anyhow? No?
John Satchamellan is a delivery principal from Scott Logic. He's going to give a talk on the Agile puzzle, and I'll let John Satchel explain the rest of it.
Yeah, thank you very much for the introduction.
Thank you.
I'll try to do this microphone now and attach it somewhere. It doesn't hurt. All right. Does it work? Good. Okay, great. Yeah, thank you very much for coming. It's great to speak in front of such an amazing crowd. Agile puzzle, yeah. Should I say something about myself further? I can do that. So delivery principle is the title. So what's more important, I think, for this audience is I've done Agile since 2004. Back then as a developer, went through project management and ended up 2 years ago here at Scott Logic, where the exciting journey continues with a lot of different clients, usually big organizations. And those big organizations, they seem to have something in common. Some problems, some challenges, and I want to talk about something that puzzles me, an Agile puzzle. It's detailed planning and tracking in Agile. We shouldn't see that, but we do. We do see that a lot, and I was recently especially puzzled about this, so I thought, how do I explain it to the guys that what they're doing is inherently not right? But let's first maybe try to understand why this is happening. So I want to talk quickly about this progress tracking trap or story point tracking trap or something like that, and look why it's happening. I want to have a look at estimation of velocity and story points briefly, and then maybe have a quick chat about an alternative approach. And I would really welcome your ideas and thoughts at the end. Let's see if I can keep this within 20 minutes roughly. Let's get started. The progress tracking trap. What's happening at the beginning of a project? That's a question, right? We usually start out with a vision. Somebody wants to do something, build a great product or enhancement or whatever, right? So they want to actually implement it. How do they do that? They need money for it. They need resources. They need probably people. They need maybe stuff, material, whatever. They need budget for that. How do you get budget in a larger organization nowadays to implement your vision? Usually with a business plan, right? So you go to the one who holds the purse strings and say, look, I want to do this great thing, this great product, and I need this. I need money for that. And they ask, okay, how much money do you need? Yeah, I think it will be whatever, $500,000. And then they say, okay, good. What do I get for that? And then they write down roughly high level what the stakeholder will get for it. And they ask, of course, when do I get it? Maybe middle of the year or end of the year or something like that. Can you be a bit more specific? So this kind of conversation, right? The business plan is very high level, but it creates expectations, very crucial expectations here about time, about money, but also scope. And I think you are guessing already what will bite us here later on. If you have expectations during the course of such a project, you actually want to know, will they be fulfilled, these expectations? And that's where the tracking comes in, progress tracking. Where are we? How much have we done? Will we be doing this scope that we thought initially within the time and money expenditure that we thought initially? Probably not, but that's what trackers, I like to call them, progress trackers, actually do. They compare, they use the expectations from the business plan, they break it down, they do all the estimations and stuff. And in Agile, what do? They use story points and sometimes velocity for this, because it looks handy. I think very important to say at this point is that, in my opinion and in my experience, plans usually fail. Not all plans, but the detailed, long-term plans, they usually fail. But waterfall projects, these beautiful waterfall projects, they can be successful. How can that be? They have a couple of tools, right? And they actually cheat, in my opinion. They use change requests, they have change budgets, and they use time buffers and buffers on estimates and all those things, right? So in the end, you can celebrate a success. And maybe you have achieved something great in waterfall, right? You did a fantastic product in waterfall. It's possible. Done so myself with fixed price projects. However, the success is actually defined in hindsight. You have so many changes along the way that are mutually agreed and even put into contract that these plans usually do not deliver what was defined at the beginning. And that's why I say plans fail. Not because you can't deliver something great in waterfall. Yeah, you probably can with great effort and difficulty. And yeah, but in my opinion, they fail. What's the core reason for this failure? Why do these plans actually fail? Because of uncertainty. And that's actually what Agile tries to address, right? All these uncertainties. We need to learn how we are going to do this whole project, right? We need to learn skills. We need to maybe find out what we are actually going to produce. Because we will see it's a journey, this product. And what we thought at the beginning is the right thing to do might turn out at the end as a lame duck, or something really uninteresting. And not the right thing for the customers. Nobody buys it. Happened many times. Last but not least, teams can change, of course. If you lose knowledge, then your whole plan and with velocity and all that stuff will not work out. Have a look later on this. So I think it can be done if we accept these uncertainties. I think we can do better. But hold on. Teams still estimate, right? Why do they do that? They want to understand the requirements. They want to understand the stories, for example, if you do Scrum. They give it as input to prioritization for the product owner. So product owner doesn't plan, right? He prioritizes, or she creates a list of items, a sequence, without usually times for each item. That's why it's not a plan, in my opinion. It's also used for planning. Interesting. But they plan also, but the team usually plans. If we use Scrum as an example, and they plan only one sprint, usually. That means it's short time horizon, right? At the beginning I said long-term detailed plans are prone to failure. Also, these plans, they don't always work, but they create commitment. They create ownership, a certain kind of responsibility from the team. But it's not brought externally onto the team. The team themselves say, okay, this is what we are comfortable with, right? This is what we want to do. This is what we can do in a sprint, we think. It's no guarantee, but we will do our best. Those who came across coaching maybe already, these two things are actually very interesting for coaching or agile coaching. This is basically awareness and this is responsibility. So the team becomes aware and the team is responsible for what they are going to do. But there's more, right? They estimate, but we have velocity. Can I not use velocity to plan a little bit forward, right, from outside? Maybe a bit cheeky, but I see the product backlog, right? So I have high-level t-shirts, estimates maybe on them, and yeah, I think I can use this velocity thing. Velocity, from my experience, comes from those burn-down charts. You see here one of them, and basically the slope of a well-behaving one. Not the bad ones, not the green one probably, but the other ones. So burn-down charts are a great tool for the team again to spot early warning signs, to see what's going on in our sprint, and judge it and say, okay, what do we need to do maybe? Do we need to do something about this? So this is very concerning, the green one, right, for example. I don't discuss all of them. I personally don't like burn-down charts because whenever I used them as a project manager, the team were already aware of them and of the problems, and they were already tackling the problems, actually. This was, in fact, mostly a reporting tool. And I don't really like that very much myself because it's about the team and how they do the work and how they create success. If we look at velocity, so like average velocities, that comes from the burn-down charts, I think. If we look at velocity per sprint, the theory is we go up a little bit and then we enter a stable mode, and that's what I use then for my forecasting and tracking then also, of course. However, we can see here, just an example, that a number of events can radically change the velocity of a team. So we see a bit of a ramp up here, right? So that's what we see often. But then, what happened here? Someone came, some manager came and say, look guys, you need to do 150 story points in a sprint to be successful. You're too slow. That's not good enough what you do there. And the team suddenly gets much more intense and does 100 story points instead of like 60, 70, 80. What happens here is gamification in most cases. So they just change the estimates. And yeah, they do a lot more velocity. Is it more work? More results? No. And then it drops down here at the end. What's happening there? Simply a new phase in the project maybe. So a tech migration started here, like we moved from Angular to React or something like that, right? So we have done the main features, maybe MVP was ready here somewhere, and now we realize some performance is not working, we need to change something under the hood. Nobody has done that before, and so we don't know how it works. We need to explore it. Velocity drops down, boom. This is, I think, obviously not a good tool to forecast because it can change dramatically. It can change with the project context, but also with the environment, so managers around them starting to force people to gamify. People don't like that, right? So this gamification is not a mean spirit in teams, not at all. It is more like an evasion of pressure. They know we can't do more. We already do our best. If you want us to do more, you need to help us, right? You need to get that environment faster. Our tests should run faster, or we need a better IDE, or whatever it is that is hampering the team, right? Maybe a role is missing. Maybe there are many, many reasons. That's the only way to effectively get the team better, not with some goals. They're usually counterproductive. These are just a couple of examples why I think velocity is really not a good tool for forecasting. And I see it a lot used, unfortunately. Getting back to this, I want to do a vision, right? I want to create something. You tell me I can't plan. If I can't plan, I can't tell my business stakeholder, my sponsor, what he will get out of this. I go to him and say, oh, I need $1 million for 5 people or 10 or whatever for next year. Say, okay, what do I get out of that? Yeah, you know, I don't know. Let's see. That doesn't fly, obviously, right? Wouldn't fly with me, and with you guys probably also not if you were that person. So what do? We need budget. No, we don't want to go into that trap again, right? We don't want to enter the planning and that phase, right? We now realize that this budget planning, the expectation setting, leads to the tracking and is totally anti-agile. I think we don't want to do this. What can we do? We can have a look at the lean framework, for example, for this. Scrum is, for example, already very close to these things as it has sprints and those cycles, right? Producing something shippable or potentially shippable. The build, measure, learn cycle can be used, right? Within Scrum, for example, as part of an agile way of working. What if we have an idea, our vision at the start. What if we say, oh, okay, we want to build something, and this product, so one sprint, ideally, or maybe in extreme case, maybe a couple of sprints in reality, we think we can build you this product in like 6 weeks or 4 weeks or something. Do you give me £15,000 for that? Ah, that sounds interesting. That could work, right? It's not a year, but that means, in essence, we need to look at financing in an agile way. And there are other dependencies. It's not just money. Sometimes we need marketing and other departments too that need to chip in. Sometimes you want to create a great product. You have a big vision, and you want to say, oh, we start this and we reserve so much money and we're going to do this. You can't do that if you want to stay flexible, agile, changing direction, right? Over planning, if we remember. So this way of marketing might not work, but there are other ways. So in fact, I think agile is an organizational feature. Agile financing, yes, please. Please, let's finance this whole thing agile. Reserve maybe for a year budget for whatever projects you want to run, right? Do that. Reserve $1 million or $2 million, or in a small company, reserve a bit of money, right? You want to spend that bit of money to explore new products, new visions, new ideas. It can be small things. It doesn't need to be the $1 million ones. I just use that because working with big organizations, these are not actually big figures. Agile organizations, that's what we need, I think. And now looking at a rather old org chart of a big company, I think we start understanding why this is so hard for big organizations. They think we need a team, an agile team. But for a team to work in an agile way, they need the whole organization backing it. It can be legal, it can be marketing, it can be financing. There is plenty of stuff around a project that needs to enable those guys to work in the right way for the company. It's not even only for the team, it's for the company, right? We want to build the right product. So if we go back to this lean thing, this is trying to build the right thing, right? We build something small, we measure, we learn out of it, generate new ideas, get buy-in again from our sponsor about the new idea, right? Or new direction, whatever, right? I think that should be the way to go with these things. And actually, I'm ready for your questions, I hope at least. Yeah, shoot.
to me, this appears to be, I'm not an expert on Agile, by the way.
It's fine, it's fine.
But this seems to me a bit like venture financing, where you basically give money to teams that you think deserve that money for them to get to the next stage.
Yeah.
So I guess with that, won't you also get lots of, well, venture financing is risky, isn't it? So therefore, wouldn't there be lots of failures as well as a result? So doesn't that all sort of end up equating to how it works anyway? And
yeah, I think it's an interesting question. Thank you very much. My personal opinion on this is, if you invest a little bit of money to try an idea and check if it's the right thing, you check with the market, right? So if we go back to this build, measure, learn cycle, we check here if this is the right thing we build actually, and if not, we just spend 2 weeks of money. That's it, and we can go then with the data. Like, what's measure? What's data? Maybe I'm not tangible enough here. It can be, for example, you produce a mini MVP or a concierge MVP, for example, something that's not even in code, and you go out, find early adopters, 1, 2, 3 guys or girls, and you get their opinion. Do you like it? Is it something you would buy? What would you pay for it if it were for real? Would you pay anything for it? Maybe not. If you can explore those viability questions. Do I like the new product or not? In a very short timeline. And you're right. There is a risk. There is a high amount of risk, and you can lose a cycle. You can lose a couple of cycles. But it's opposed to the old model where you say, I put aside budget for 6 months, or maybe 12, and see only at the end when I go live after 12 months, after spending millions, if this is actually the right product. Do we have the right performance, the right quality? Is our marketing up to speed at all? What if we miss a deadline that we have set ourselves by marketing? So we tell everybody, we produce this great product and it will be out on whatever, 1st of July. And then you miss it. It's horrible for your reputation, potentially. It's really, really dangerous. It can cost you so much money, right? Huge amounts. If you look at for example, companies like Monzo, or now Mondo originally, they did it really smart. They started very small, MVP. They brought it out to a couple of people, created a buzz, but with very specific users, early adopters, those who wanted to see what could be the future of banking. Maybe it's not, but whatever. They thought it could be, so they were interested. You get the right kind of people on board with this, and you can, they will tell everybody basically if they love it or hate it or whatever. They will accept all the problems and difficulties and changes. And I'm not sure if anybody, or probably a couple of you have this Monzo thing. When they release something, they don't set themselves a deadline. They say, oh, accounts is the next big thing, but they don't tell you when to expect it. They just don't do it. And it's not necessary. We sit all there and say, when are these accounts coming? I really want them, right? You're right, it's not riskless.
Cool.
Make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
So when it comes to agile financing, what other ways to implement it apart from paper sprint?
You could think about a lot of different models. I think what's really important is that you align with those who have the money and who have, from the business side, basically, who want the product potentially. They need to understand your idea. They need to like it, and you need to find out how long a cycle to something meaningful here for them to see and agree makes sense. I think a sprint, if you take 2 week sprints, is probably far too short. Probably it's a bit of a longer journey. You need to see again their environment. Do they have a yearly budgeting in the company? Maybe they need to set a yearly budget aside. What are their reaction times? So I think these are the parameters you need to look at if you want to look at planning horizons for financing. You could also say, for example, I give you money for 6 weeks, but we review every sprint every 2 weeks, and and if something goes bad, we just still stop it, right? I think, yeah. Does that answer the question, kind of?
Yeah. I'm just worried that actually, so I totally get this. If you
Yeah.
start talking about cycles,
Yes.
if we convince stakeholders about build, measure, learn,
Yeah.
and if you say if you finance one cycle or two, this is great. I'm just wonder if it can still fall into the same trap.
How so?
So, I guess the question from people who give money is going to be, what's the length of your cycle?
Yeah.
And then you also come back to the same question of giving some estimates which are likely to be wrong.
Yeah. I mean, we have this planning fails, I said in the beginning. In the middle, you saw with the estimate slide, right? You saw that I said, okay, the team actually estimates and they actually plan, but they plan only a sprint.
Yeah, so
right? So short time horizon, maybe detailed, but short time horizons. That can work pretty well, not perfectly, no guarantees, but well enough usually for to say you're going to review X, Y, Z in 2 weeks' time.
yeah, that's why I think like paper sprint like works tremendously well.
Yeah.
And we practiced that at one of my previous company, which was a consultancy.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking how to apply that for more product development within a large organization.
I mean, the product can be a new feature, right?
Yeah.
Can be just a single new feature on an existing application. It doesn't need to be a whole new product. That's not necessary, right? A product can be a single little thing. And I think what you need to look at is how big your features are. How much time does a team need to implement at least one of them, right? If you have small features and you can do it every sprint. If you have bigger features, right, like Monzo accounts, that's many sprints, right? And you probably don't want to plan them also financially into the future. So keep it to the small things. Keep it to, if you can, keep it to a sprint, I would say. If you can't, because it's a bit too big, like 2-3 sprints, and the team, take it to the team actually, right? And talk to them and say, look, this big feature, probably 2 or 3 sprints, right? How do we explain that to the business stakeholders? I would say be honest, be open, be transparent. So this is what we think. It's big, it's difficult because of these reasons, and convince them.
Cool. So in other words, if I
So we might have to carry
Sorry.
that one into the break, I think. We've got a bit of a schedule. Yeah.
But I'm happy to talk one-to-one afterwards. That's absolutely no problem.
One final question for John Saka before we go on to the next speaker. Hopefully a quick one.
Did you manage to work this agile financing with your own customers?
I was expecting that question. No, actually not. Yeah.
What do you think of that? Would your sales team not want to go for a fixed price, large number, or planned up front?
We don't want to do fixed price. We don't like it for the obvious reasons. That doesn't mean we would never do it. So I'm not talking here only companies, also just my personal opinion here. I think you're touching the reason why I do this talk and why I created a similar blog on our blog post. I am going to talk, and I'm talking to our customers. I'm explaining to them this is basically a way for me to tell them, look guys, we shouldn't do this, and there are good reasons not to do it, and there are other ways of doing it actually. I think what I also see a lot is that big organizations say we want to be agile, and they think one team, and they need to understand that this is an organizational feature, and that this is a transformation.
And one last question.
Yes.
What about buy-in internally?
Within an hour, I think we would love it. All the people I've spoken here, they would absolutely love it. The commitment is really absolutely key. It's a motivational factor. If you start tracking from outside, you kill that. I've seen it many times. You absolutely kill it. And that's the worst thing for the client, actually. Not only for us, but also for the client. It's really, really bad and sad.
So this comes to a point that we're trying to get, how we get people at upper management to
Yes.
take the agile training as well.
Yeah, you're right.
Okay, so on that note,
Thank you very much for the questions.
So we'll just have a quick swap over for our next speaker. So for those that are standing up in the corridor there are seats through in our, what do you call it, our extension or overflow area maybe? So the overflow through there. There's actually pizza there as well, so if you want to have a seat, go through that section there.
Do I need this microphone on?
Yeah, I think for the recording. You've got the clip here.
Right. Ah, right, excellent. All good.
Okay, we're going to roll straight into our next talk. Yeah. So we've got another short talk. Use the hand thing. It always works. Thank you very much. Yeah. So, next speaker is Chris Priest, who's an Agile coach. He's going to be speaking on no estimates from the trenches. So after this talk, we'll have a break. So anyway, over to Chris. Thank you, Chris.
Thanks very much. I know we've got a break coming after this, but unfortunately I haven't estimated how long this is going to be, so fingers crossed, eh?
What do you mean?
So my name's Chris, and I'm currently working with the NHS in Glasgow. We're doing some good work there. I've not been there very long, only a few weeks, so what I'm going to talk about today is some work that I did at Registers of Scotland, which is Scottish Government based in Edinburgh. I was there for a year, started last year. We use a Scrum Ban model, if anyone's ever heard of that. Anyone, who's using Scrum here? Most people using Scrum? Kanban? Somebody? Waterfall? One person using waterfall, flying the flag at the back there. Well, what I'm going to talk about today actually overlaps nicely with everything that you do. Because estimates tend to permeate, whatever model you're using, they tend to permeate things there. So the previous speaker covered some of this stuff, and I must say I echo exactly what the previous speaker said. For me, ideally, you want to be moving towards an agile organisation. Some of the agile financing stuff that he was talking about, I'm a very, very big fan of. It's quite a difficult thing to do, though, especially for some big organisations, even for some small organisations. And I think we've all seen some of these reasons about why we estimate. I think most people here involved in software development at some point have come across estimation, whether you've done it yourself or whether you've been involved in that. And these are the kind of questions that people ask. And I put on here that they're reasonable questions, but I put reasonable in inverted commas, because I do think it depends on your point of view. So I think, you know, if you are asking these questions, perhaps you're asking the wrong questions. But actually, these questions still get asked. So is there a way of managing this? Well, there used to be a way. Now, I was talking to somebody quite recently who'd never been on a waterfall project, and that made me feel quite old. Because I remember on one waterfall project I was working on where we set aside 2 days to do estimation, and we did this. We worked out all the stuff that we needed to build, and we put a time against each one, and we added them all up. Ironically, though, the 2 days of estimation took us 3 days, so go figure. Now, management like this kind of stuff. It's really easy to manage. If you do that, then you can make statements like this. I can halve the delivery time by doubling the resources. That makes perfect sense. As a manager, you know yourself, you go in, put 100% more people in there, you're getting half the time every single time, won't you? So I'm not going to go over the reasons why time-based estimates are bad. I think a lot of people realise that now. And in fact, a lot of people use relative size estimation. So who here is using story points? Yep. Good stuff. So they realised in the 70s, 80s and 90s that using time-based estimation wasn't a good idea. So they came up with relative size estimation, and we start having these kind of terms now. So we use story points, which a lot of people are familiar with. We use a Fibonacci scale sometimes. Not all people do. T-shirt sizing. We do planning poker sometimes as well, for different reasons. We might factor in complexity as well, and lots of other different stuff. It's a great plus on time-based estimates. So it accommodates all the non-backlog work you do, all the meetings you have to go to, all the emails you have to answer, all things like that. It forces a conversation as well. Critical when you're doing story point estimation is that you have to have a conversation with each other to work out what number you're going to give it. So it stimulates a shared understanding. It helps manage risk and complexity. Stuff can be big and simple, or it can be potentially small, but quite complex. Now, crucially as well, it protects the team as well, because you don't go, you can dev that in 2 hours, you can do it in an hour though. Come on, up your game kind of. You don't, those conversations don't happen because it's team-based estimates. So they're a big plus, and that's probably why a lot of you are using them. So, I'm going to pick on you because you're at the front, unfortunately. You said you were doing Scrum. Do you know what your velocity is?
Yes.
What is it?
Some numbers to replace, say 120.
120. That's pretty good. So, what was it the sprint before? What was it the sprint?
110.
110. So were you better next last sprint in this sprint? That's good. So, do you take that into planning? So what would you do? What would you do for your next plan? Would you take 115 as an average?
Actually, what we do was, okay, at my first company, what we would normally do, would take average velocity of our past sprints, like say our past sprints, we would just average it out, and also then we calculate capacity based on non-outs, based on some availability. Standard
stuff. I hear this a lot.
Yeah.
Average velocity. Some people use yesterday's weather. That's basically, what did we do last sprint? We're going to go off that. How many times do your sprints turn out exactly how you planned them?
Actually,
Don't say all the time. No one will believe you.
okay, so I'll take an example of my previous company. So actually, like after say 5 sprints down the project in a well-established team, it gets like very predictable.
Okay, it gets predictable.
Yeah, especially if, in addition to taking average velocity, we also look at capacity.
Okay.
Which actually includes planning for future, whether someone is on holiday, whether someone is working on some other project. So we also include people's availability.
Now that sounds to me like a recipe for black magic. All that stuff you do in there, you've got this velocity, you're doing capacity, you're kind of scribbling numbers on paper, you're throwing it up, and actually you feel like you're quite predictable, but it's probably not exact. And you're only planning for, how long are your sprints?
2 weeks.
2 weeks. So you're roughly on track for 2 weeks, but there's a bit of give and take, so you can kind of see 2 weeks ahead, but it's a little bit flexible. Okay. So we weren't quite as fortunate as you, and I'm sure some people are better than that, and some people are worse than that. And the team I was working with didn't like it at all. Couldn't see any value in it. They were always wrong. Their velocity never stabilised for a variety of different reasons. Some good, some bad, some within the team, some external to the team. Management were frustrated. They did have questions about when might we get this. This was kind of a legacy system replaceable. So you know, there was a lot of things that were going wrong. We were always off. So I don't know. Off can be, you know, different shades. But whenever we did sprint planning, it never actually worked out exactly where we were going to go. Now, I've been slightly ambitious with this PowerPoint presentation in that this isn't the font I chose, which I wasn't too fussed about, but I also included video and an external website as well. So, fingers crossed. I'm hoping this is going to go well. Now, I actually videoed my team doing an estimation session. So, I don't know, you guys have all done, do you use planning poker, things like that? Yeah. So, here's a video, hopefully this will work and you'll be able to hear it, of our team doing an estimation session.
Well, if you're ready, let's play number one. Julie to play first.
3,
9,
16,
12,
8.2,
4,
That's number one, round 2. Simon to play first.
27,
30,
18,
54.
That's number one. Let's go to the maths board. Julie.
I have the 4, the 6, and the 3.4.
That's number one. We like those decimals, Julie. Simon.
I'd like the root 14 and the 12.
That's number one, round 3. Julie to play first.
8 minus 4.
That's number one, Simon.
109 times 17.
That's number one.
Obviously, that wasn't my team. You could tell that because of all the laughter. But we do try to have a crystal ball, don't we, and kind of come up with these numbers. And yeah, they stimulate good conversation, but it can seem a little bit weird, can't it? You know, it can seem a little bit strange to say, well, that's an 8. No, I think it's a 5. Well, why do you think it's a 5? Well, I think, you know, this, that, and the other. And it's good at stimulating conversation, but it's just number wang. That's certainly what my team felt. So, you all use relative size estimation. I noticed something about relative size estimation that I'm going to share with you. Now, when you do relative size estimation, there is a number that you come up with that's too big. Yep, we're not having it in our sprint, that's too big. There is probably some stuff that you don't estimate because you're not going to create a ticket or have a planning poker session. So there's stuff that's too small. And then there's some stuff in between. And there's some small stuff. Yep. And there's some big stuff. Yep. And you get small stuff and big stuff in various degrees in each sprint. Okay? So as you go through your sprints, yeah, you get lots and lots of these things, don't you? You don't take in stuff that's too big. You don't take in stuff that's too small. What's just happened there? Well, what's happened there is, when you look at that over a long enough space of time, because they're all relative to each other, relative size approaches 1. If you've got an average number of tickets, if all your tickets were all size 8, then relatively, they're all exactly the same as each other, aren't they? They're all 1. Okay? So if you look at this, over time, relative size will always approach 1. So you'll have 3 types of ticket. Not worth, but trivial, size 1, too big. So if you want to start thinking about estimation, and indeed doing no estimates, first thing, just count how many work items you do. They're all of size 1. So every time they cross into done, that's just 1, and another 1, and another 1. Now you can start to collect data on this kind of things as well. And this has got cycle time. Cycle time is a Kanban thing, but you can do it with Scrum anyway. You basically log the date that something comes into the system, and you log the date that something pops out the system, i.e. gets done. And you plot it on a scatter plot. So this is the amount of time it took. This is the date it was completed. Now, if you look at over this side, we've got 3 dots here. That one took longer to do than this one below it. What was the estimate of those? Well, we don't know. We don't know. That could have been bigger than that, or that could have been bigger than that. But we don't know. And I'll argue tonight that doesn't actually matter. What does matter is when it was finished. Okay? Now you can do some clever stuff with this. You can capture trends. So instead of doing a sprint by sprint measure, you can actually capture trends in a much fine-grained way across each item. So you're starting to gather data that is much more granular, and you can do a lot with granular data, much more than a velocity. Now, no estimates. I said at the start, flippantly, I hadn't estimated how long this presentation was going to take, and that was a lie. I had estimated it. I've never done it before, but I'm hoping it's going to take 20 minutes. I estimated that's 20 minutes worth of work. Now, a key thing about no estimates, and if you read up on this, this will become apparent, it's not doing estimates. In fact, they do say it stands for not only estimates, because we do need to estimate. But we were doing binary estimates when we started doing this. So the question was, will this fit in a sprint? Yes or no? That's a much different question to whether it's an 8 or a 5. That's still an estimate. But you can go, yes, it definitely will. No, it definitely won't. We're not sure. If it's no or we're not sure, break it down. Now, what we found was after a while that we started driving more effective behaviours. Instead of going, well, we always take 13s into our sprint. If it's 13, we'll just run with it. We asked the question on every single story, can it be broken down further? So we were reducing our batch size all the time. We were making things as granular as possible. So we were having constructive conversations. We concentrated, because we had to, on having a proper shared understanding. We didn't just stop estimating and hope that we all had a common understanding. It forced us to talk about things more. which for me is much more effective than coming up with a number to prove that you did that. Now our estimates started to become implicit. So we didn't actually ask per ticket, will this fit in a sprint? We had a conversation around it and we'd know very quickly whether or not it fit in a sprint. So we didn't even have to start asking those questions after a while. It just became part of what we did. Now, that's all very well. But there was a point that we got to where we went, this is amazing. This is really, really good. Now, we weren't estimating forwards, we were collecting data about what we were doing, and we were using that data. Now there's a difference there. One, the forward looking is doing estimation. The looking at data and projecting forward is prediction. Okay, now you might argue semantically about that. That's the two things that we called it. Ooh. That wasn't me. Now, what you can do with scatter plots is you can gather statistics. Now, I don't know anyone who did A-level maths. I know a little bit about this, I'm no expert. You can do things like variance. You can do standard deviation. You can do standard error. Okay? Now, they're all little things that on the blobs you would have little bars coming out of them. It'll say how far from they deviate from averages and things like that. Now, one of the things that you can do with standard deviation and standard error is you can run a thing called a Monte Carlo simulation. Now, casinos always win, yep, because they know the probability of everything that's going to happen. And over time, the probability evens out. Well, this is the definition of a Monte Carlo simulation. It produces distributions of possible outcome values by using probability distributions. Variables can have different probabilities of different outcomes occurring. Probability distributions are a much more realistic way of describing uncertainty in variables of risk analysis. Now, that's a very fancy way of saying if you've got something that's inherently risky and you know how probable it is to happen, you can simulate it 1,000,000 times and you end up with a distribution curve that's a probability curve. So, fingers crossed, the video worked, so I'm hoping this will. I'm now going to show you a Monte Carlo simulation on some of that data. Right. This is a website called Actionable Agile. And you can see here that we've got a scatter plot. We've actually got a scatter plot of 6 teams. I'm just going to select a couple of teams on this, so we've got a slightly different view. So you can see what's happening. So that's a scatter plot like I showed you before. There are probabilities now on the length it takes to do each work item. Bear in mind they're all of size 1. So now we can go in and we can ask these data questions. So we can ask the data, how much stuff might we get done by the end of January? And it runs 10,000 rolls of the dice for you. We can simulate more, and we end up with a distribution curve of probability. Now, if somebody asks you, what can we have by when? This is really easy now, because you can say, well, how much risk are you prepared to take? We've got more than a 99% chance of getting 20 items done. But we might not. In that 1,000,000 rolls of the dice, sometimes we only did 15. Are we going to get 100 done? Well, I wouldn't be putting my mortgage on that. We did do it twice out of 1,000,000. What about this? 50-50. We'll get 53 done at 50-50. The measure we settled on was 85%. So with a 5 out of 6 chance, we can get 42 stories done. You can flip this on its head as well, and you can say, when? So when might I get 100 items done? And again, you can simulate more trials. And you give the risk to the person. It completely devolves the team whatsoever. The team can validate this, by all means, but if you want to be 95% certain that we're going to get all those things done and you want to go and spend money on a marketing campaign and all the other things like that, then you need to do that by the 8th of May 2018. Which again, it's up to them. If they want to go and make business decisions on this, then you're giving them the control to go and do that. So that was our wow moment. There's a lot of other stuff in here as well. I'm not a salesman for Actionable Agile, but there's a ton of stuff in here, and it's a talk on itself just to go through it all. So let's see if we can get back in. So there's Actionable Agile, actionableagile.com if you want to go and have a look at that. So again, on the road to no estimates, don't estimate, predict. Gather data. I'm a big fan of data. I love data. I love a good graph. Yeah, if I don't get graphs about teams, then I'm at a loose end. But use it to predict. Yeah, we don't do estimates. Well, we do. But we do those binary ones that become implicit in the way we work with each other. So what happened with this team? They loved it. No more estimates. It was fantastic. We just said to them, does that data look okay? And they all went, yep. Off you go. Discussion of work was more effective. It forced us to have those conversations that story points are supposed to have, that planning poker's for. Why do you do planning poker? We do planning poker to make sure that everybody gets a voice. So why not just make sure everybody gets a voice? We focused on every single ticket to make it as small as possible. We didn't go, that's a 13, that'll do, we'll carry on. No, we went, can we break this down any further? Can we break it down any further? Management liked it. And indeed, management sent other teams to us to say, go and have a look at what they're doing. We like that. Can you guys do that? And some of the teams did start to take it on. So I can't take credit for this. This wasn't my idea. There's a book called No Estimates, How to Measure Project Progress Without Estimating. And then there's the website and another book by that that's Actionable Agile, Metrics for Predictability and Introduction. Very, very good books. I can highly, highly recommend them. So, no more number wang. Questions?
We do a similar type of Kanban, again, no estimates. One issue I find is the same way they can pressure you to do 150 points, they can pressure you with the work items. You could potentially have an inflation of work items as well. So how do you deal with that?
There's a number of different ways you can deal with that. For starters, I don't think you should have 150 items in your backlog. I think you should have 2-3 sprints worth of stuff. So there's other ways you can do that. And I think doing things like epic mapping and other kind of things that are outside the traditional Scrum backlog. But, you know, I think if they are doing that, then it's a symptom of a deeper misunderstanding, I think. And I think they need probably initially some training and certainly some long conversations about why this is a bad idea. Any other questions?
Can you flip back to the last slide?
I can. Easy question, that one. I like those kind of questions. Other questions?
So I'm kind of interested. So you might break down enough work for the next couple of sprints and you can punt it through Monte Carlo and say, how are we going to finish it? What happens when you have that question of when are we going to finish the project when you haven't broken down all those work items? Again,
so what we tried to do, it was okay. So I mentioned before about having epics, and we essentially looked at the epics. We looked at the epics we'd done and how many stories were underneath them. And we were into kind of still an estimation mode, but we kind of t-shirt sized some epics and we used some kind of rough story counts. Is that kind of a 10-story epic, a 5-story epic, a 20-story epic? And use that to say 150. But to be honest with you, if you look at the distribution of that, when you're looking at 150 items, it's too wide to make any rational business decisions on it. Is a 4-month gap across there. So if they're basing business decisions on that, then they're doing it wrong. So you should use it for much shorter term planning because that's where the range is in a much more manageable way.
One of the things that we did about a year ago was we take a guess at how many work items in the backlog.
Yep.
And then the Monte Carlo method, by looking at data in the past, we could estimate how many. We thought it was going to be 5 stories, but in actual fact it turned out to be 8 stories. So you add a layer on top that says that, if you like, inflates the number of stories and puts a range in it. So it's like, and that actually turned out to be quite accurate over a period of 6 months.
Absolutely. Now, I think the first speaker had a lot of very important points to make on that. And whenever I hear about these kind of wonderful black magic, eye of Newton, leg of toad kind of thing, I just think, really, we're using too much stuff here to answer the wrong questions. This is just a way of kind of helping management come to terms with some of the stuff that they need to do. And I think you've got to be careful not to put too much effort in to try and be too accurate. It's just got to be kind of a quick stuff. Working software, that's what you need to be aiming for. That's where the effort should go to, I think.
Okay, I think if there are more questions for Chris, we can do the break, I think.
And I think I estimated that quite well. Thank you.
Okay, I believe there's some more pizza. So some more pizza left. So we're going to have about a 15-minute break, then we'll pick up again around about 20 past.
Go around the front, we'll have to go around rather than kicking the tripod.
Okay, so got a bit of fun coming up next, I think. Yeah. Eventually, yeah. So our next speaker is it's going to be a lightning talk, a short little thing. I'm not saying too much more. It's called the Rubber Band Game. So we'll see what's going to happen. And then this is Richard Cornelius, who's an Agile coach at RBS. So thank you, Richard.
Okay, thank you. So I've also done a hashtag no estimates. Stephen said how long would it take? I said about 10 minutes. And then I looked at what I actually wanted to do. So we shall.
Don't tell me this.
Of course. Come on. Why did that not go? Oh, it's changing the brightness on this screen. There's only one slide on here. See, I'm going to take all this time up. How do you start a presentation without hitting F5? Way, thank you. Okay, so basically, when we learn something, we seem to pick it up, we go away, and then, you know, we forget it. We say, oops, that was wrong, you know. It's like we've taken a rubber band and all of a sudden it just snapped back. This rubber band keeps pulling us back all the time. Now, I'm sure you've seen it in yourselves. I'm sure you've been frustrated with it when somebody else does it, especially if you're reliant on them to do something for you. But it's important to actually understand it, because you need to give people the space to learn. You need to give yourself space to learn, right? So why does it occur, right? And basically, it's all about how your brain works. So I want to demonstrate to you how your brain works and why it is. So for this, I'm going to need 3 volunteers, please. 1, lovely. 2 more. Excellent, come up. Thank you very much. So, I'm going to move to this side a minute. I'm going to need someone who is really knowledgeable, knows what they're doing, has all the answers. Right, anything. Right, second person I'm going to want is someone who is a creative type person. And the third person, I just want to be a maverick. Right? Because we have a maverick. Who would like to be the creative person? Ah, you know everything. So, right, being I have an elastic band, I want a bit of safety things. So, the creative person, you see things clearly. Right, so I'd like you to put some nice clear glasses on.
So that's the creative, yeah.
You're the creative. Sorry, thank you very much. Yes. So, the person who knows everything, you look through tinted glasses.
Okay.
So you're rose tinted, so I'm going to call you clear thinker. I'm going to call you Rose. Happy?
Happy.
And our maverick, there's your maverick goggles. So initially, maverick, you don't have a lot to do. Right? You can happily, though, watch and enjoy what goes on. So, clear thinker and Mr. Tint. Is that better for you? I'd like you to take one end each. Now, in the brain, there is 100 billion neurons. Right? That... yeah. That is as many as there are stars in the Milky Way. right? That's one brain, right? Between, we have here a very small brain. We have 3 neurons, right? This is our simulation brain. Neurons have connections, right? For our one here, we just have a single connection. But in your brain, each neuron can have up to 10,000 connections, which basically means there can be a quadrillion connections in a brain, right? And then if you take the number of brains that are on the world, that actually means there are more connections than there are stars in the estimated universe. That's a heck of a lot, right? Brains are very complex. However, we're going to start now with a nice, simple connection, right? I'm going to take you on a journey, a learning journey, right? So, going to send our brain away on a course, going on an Agile Scrum Master course, right? So, I would like Clear Thinker and Tint to start stretching your connection. Just walk around a bit, right? It stretches a long way. It really is quite effective, you know, and then walking back, walking around, you know, taking a bit. Now, I'm going to send a chemical pulse, right, from one end to the other, right? Brain uses different ways of learning, right? One is a chemical. It works really, really quickly. We take it in very, very quickly, right? However, right, it doesn't produce lasting results because once the chemical's gone, right, you're learning, you've changed a bit, but not hugely, right? Because at this point in time, although we've stretched it, right, we've still got Clear Thinker across here and Tint across here. Nothing's changed. Okay, so you've done your Scrum Master course, right? Just wander up and down a little bit, put it in, pull it out, stretch your brain a little bit, right? Excellent, right? You're now starting back at work, you've got a Scrum team, and you're starting to put some of this stuff into practice, right? So keep on pulling it, we'll keep on those chemicals wandering about. Have you noticed that nothing else has actually changed still, right? So at this point, I would like Maverick to come in and shake hands with Clear Thinker. Right, thank you, Maverick, that's done. We'll put a bit more chemicals in, you're still trying to learn. Right, Maverick, come in, shake hands again. Right, thank you, it's done. Has anything else changed? No. Right, this time, Maverick, come in. Right, you're going to... You're not going to break anything, no. Come in, and Clear Thinker, I would like you to hand the end of the connection to Maverick, and I'd like you to move down towards the middle. All right, so we'll send a few more chemicals on, and I'd like all 3 of you now to start wandering about. All of a sudden, right, what you've got here now is your brain has dynamically changed, right? Plasticity, right? Your brain can rewire itself and continues to do it a lot. Hey, if you've got a quadrillion connections, you need to do it very quickly in a lot of them. However, rewiring of the brain takes time, right? So the chemical action is really, really quick. The rewiring takes time, right? So we've done a bit of our Scrum mastery, and on our learning journey now, we come to Lean Agile Edinburgh, right? Way! So, what I'd like now is Tint to go and shake hands with Maverick. That's it, you can wander off again. Right? Okay, quick as that, it's only an evening thing, you haven't learnt too much, but you've taken something else in. Gone back to work again, right? You're trying to put something into situation. So, keep those chemicals going, keep all that learning actually happening. Maverick, come and shake hands again with Tint. Okay, lovely. So, and now, come and do it again, but this time, what I want you to do, right, is hand the end to tint, right? And for yourself to move further along the connection, right? Has anything changed? Yeah, the brain has again changed from where it was, right? Again, it takes time. Keep the chemicals going through really nice and quick, but the actual change has occurred, right? Now, our brain is thinking, yeah, I know all this stuff now. I've done my course. I've done a bit of Scrum Mastery, right? I've even been to Lean Agile Edinburgh, and that was the best, you know. Now I'm on to continual improvement, right? And so it's working itself. So this time, right, Mr. Tint, when I ask you to do something, I want you to say as loud as you can, no, right? So let's keep those chemicals going. Keep walking around a little bit, right? And the learning comes through, and the learning is that Mr. Tint, right, should lose his connection.
No.
I'll say it again, Mr. Tint should lose his connection.
No.
It's right, because it's taken time for these connections to actually occur, right? So especially for stuff that like Agile, right, which for lots of people is really, really radical, right? We've taken years building up connections that work. So you don't want to just let go of the connections, you know, just on a whim, right? So that takes a long time. I'm going to ask you again. Are you going to let go of that connection?
No.
Right, send a few more chemicals around. Right, so this time, right, you are going to move away, right? So I would like Clear Vision and Maverick to come and take and end each. Right, and stretch it out between yourselves. Right, so we'll send a few more chemicals along it. We again have had another change. But is this the same as what we started with? No. Right? Chemical works quick. The brain rewiring takes time. That's why we get this rubber band effect sometimes putting us back in. That's it, thank you. Any questions?
I want to do it in the middle.
You can do it later. No, lovely, thank you.
What does that mean practically?
What does it mean practically? It can mean a number of things, but basically I'm using it because I'm trying to help change an organisation. And that means especially people who are a long way into their careers, right? They've learned certain behaviours because it works, because it enabled them to actually progress their career, right? So you can't expect to just tell someone that benefit is going to happen, because actually the benefit's true, right? The reality is true. You know, it's like, I'm going to give you empowerment, right? I'm going to give you, not have to worry about the teams that you look after, right? You're going to get a faster product come through, right? But all that person hears is, oh, change, fear, uncertainty, doubt, right? I need to control my products, right? And we have to change people's minds, and it's not a quick process. It's something that you have to do a piece at a time and slowly let people understand and learn for themselves. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Richard. Thank you. We're going to do a quick changeover to Mike. Mike's got the final talk tonight, and then we'll be wrapping up. So while Mike is setting up, Mike Moran is an engineering manager from Skyscanner, and his top is on. It's got a very long title. It's not long, no, it's applied experimentation. Then
explore, exploit, and support. There you go. First, I need to get to my slide. So whilst I'm finding these slides, I should set some more context. So I'm an engineering manager at Skyscanner. So the context in which I'm talking about this, then I should point out that at Skyscanner, so show my, this is how I use a Mac normally. Nope. Come on, just trying to open it. There we go. That'll do. Okay, just going to accept on behalf of. Okay, so that's me. So basically, we run you build it, you run it, as in the things that I'm about to talk about are things that we fully owned, fully developed. Sometimes it's you got it, you run it, as in we also took over some stuff that belonged to other teams, so that'll also come into it. So the reason for saying that is that what I'm about to say doesn't necessarily apply to you, depending on context, and I'm not trying to sell you on it, I'm just trying to raise it as a possibility. So what is this? So explore, exploit, secure, as previously mentioned. This is, I'll be referring back to this form as a slide, so it'll come up a few times, is a way of thinking about how you spend your time and how you set expectations about what you're trying to achieve. Other thing I should point out before we go further is that this is not the Skyscanner way, as in we value our autonomy quite a lot in our different teams, so this is not something that every single team in Skyscanner does. Some do things like this, some do other things. So both externally and internally, this is not a be-all, end-all solution. It's a way of thinking about stuff that you might want to think about doing further. So to quickly summarize it, explore is focused on high-impact, high-risk activities. Exploit is on things you're fairly sure about. And secure is things you already have and you don't want to lose. So why do we use this? So one thing I've seen in both other companies and in Skyscanner is that you can get quite far without really having a process for this. So you can basically do all-nighters if you really need to launch a product. You can do hack days. To some extent, if you're in a small company, this is maybe not applicable to you. You can get away with not having a process for this. But what I found was that both observing in other teams and my own team was that we could easily get in the syndrome of using things like hack days as a kind of polyfiller to deal with process problems, or not actually investing in planning and that sort of stuff. We also weren't giving explicit thinking about where we want to focus our team in terms of when the payoff would be. So it might be things that are actually would only be beneficial in 6 months' time if we did something good about them. One of the other ones might be beneficial tomorrow, and we weren't giving explicit thought to that. The other thing is that we weren't explicitly managing technical debt, which is like technical debt has changed meaning quite a lot over the years. I still try to think of it in the original way, as in there's good technical debt, which is you deliberately take it on. There's bad technical debt where you'd be surprised by it, but the key thing is to manage it. So, and we weren't explicitly doing that. And the other thing is that I've always found that in a way, development at the team level is like search, as in the techniques you use for doing search in terms of Google search and exploring spaces or doing kind of things in AI are actually quite applicable and quite analogous to being a team and exploring a space, except that here the space is not finding the perfect solution to some engineering problem, it's actually finding a solution to a business problem. So I basically took that kind of background and tried to apply it to my team. So the thing I added, was not on that previous slide, was secure. So now I'm going to go through a few different examples to ground this in things we've actually done, just to illustrate how we've applied this. And I chose the experimentation because basically we do a lot of A/B tests. Unless I call it out explicitly, every single thing I'm about to say was an experiment we did, where we ran an experiment for 2 weeks or 1 week, and concluded at the end something based on facts. So first, explore. So for a while on our team, we'd been wanting to build some sort of recommender, but one of the problems was that, in a way, our funnel that we already had was it was a funnel. It forced you to do things. The one thing we did have that didn't really force you to do anything was the map, which is still on the website right now, that was very open. So we're kind of like, okay, one of our data scientists went away and looked at the data from this and said, okay, right, there appears to be people doing things in this area that we could extract value from, but it was still experimental. So what we did was we went away and we built a recommender based on that data. And then we started thinking, where can we put this? And this is where it comes into explore things. We didn't know. We didn't know where it would fit. We didn't know if it was going to be any value. We could have had to throw it all away because it was useless. So what we started doing was we started putting it in different places. So the thing on the left-hand side here is actually one of the pop-outs that comes up in the map. So I thought, okay, well, the data came from the map. Why don't we show it back in the map? Result? No. No one clicked on it. We also, later on, put it on what we call the browse pages, where we basically replace a country list that's broken out by geography and said, okay, why don't we put it there? Again, that didn't make any difference, wasn't particularly negative, but wasn't beneficial. And then we put it on the homepage. This is actually, in a way, an unfair comparison because this was our old homepage and this was the new one. We did do incremental stuff as well. It wasn't just from that to that. And so there was the thing that says recommendations for you, and the thing that's still on the website was we basically found a place to put it that was beneficial. So that's an example where we set out not with the expectation that we're going to get right first time, and when the experiment failed, as in we got an outcome that wasn't positive from one of our metrics, the action wasn't to then stop. It was to say, okay, it didn't work there, what other places can we try it? Like, we wouldn't have gone on forever, but we did try at least 3 or 4 different places. Another example is search patterns. This is arguably in the boundary between explore and exploit, which you might see in a second, but basically it's a fairly simple thing. It's looking at of people who look for flights at a particular time of year, what kind of trips are they actually searching for? And we pulled it into a service, we put it on the homepage, and it was beneficial. We actually there's been 2 ways we've done 2 of these ones where we've done an experiment head-to-head with the person. So we asked the person to say, okay, you choose your choices, and we'll let the algorithm choose its choices. We've done that twice. One time the algorithm won, one time the person won. But it was good enough at scale that we put it onto the website as a good default. So this is what when you see popular destinations, this is what's actually under the covers. So that was one where we kind of like, we didn't have a dead cert win, but it was a bit more sure in the first one example, but it was still not definite. This was another one. So yes, this is one we didn't ship. So this came out of a hack day, and we explicitly focused the hack days on exploratory behavior. We call it kind of a curl doodle or whatever. We thought, okay, if there's an event happening in a particular market, and there was a few different things we could think of, but we chose India because it was coming up. Why don't we try and link to that from the homepage as the top nav? It was a tricky one because it was both hard to measure. So in a way, we were experimenting and exploring how do you measure something that you can't run as an A/B test, because this wasn't an A/B test because we couldn't run it for a business cycle. It was basically an event. So it only happened for 2 days. So it's pretty hard to do that. We've still not solved that problem. So we were experimenting a bit with that. And also it was just an idea we had in a hack day. And we forced ourselves to get it out in 2 days after the hack day. Got it out. Scared some other people in the company about losing SEO ranking as a result of this. But that's the sort of thing we wouldn't have found out unless we hadn't put it on the site, kind of thing. We didn't do this. The company as a whole is doing some iteration on this, but we didn't take this any further. So that's one where it started with Explore. We did something, got it out quickly, high risk. We decided, actually, we're not going to keep it. So there's kind of like 3 Explore examples. Then exploit. And these, in a way, are kind of more the traditional things that we want to do that I think are going to be beneficial. But the key thing is we still base them and test them using experimentation. This is an example where we go in with a fairly good understanding that people are already using price alerts. Browse alerts are basically slightly, I won't go into all details, but basically it's a slightly less defined set of dates and times. We did it, it was beneficial, good, it's still on the site. This was another one, this was editorial content. So this is one where there's always a force within the business to occupy the top left of the homepage because I want my stuff to be there. Only one thing can actually be at the top left of the homepage in terms of the content. So one of the ideas was to say, okay, let's take stuff that's appearing anyway, so these list of destinations, and rather than putting a link through to the month view or that sort of thing, can we show more targeted content? In this case, it's manually determined. So that's basically effectively a melding of automated, sorted content with a manually chosen link. We did that. We did a few iterations on this. It wasn't perfect the first time. One of the tricky things of experimentation is that if you don't have a big enough effect, you're not going to measure anything. So we had to go through a few loops where we had to go back and get more content such that we could show any difference for the destinations we were showing. But ultimately, we did, and we've kept this, and it's still on the site right now. One of the things, going back to the Explorer, is how we measure success. So success here is we learn something, not necessarily we ship something we're definitely going to keep. As we move into exploit, it's more, pretty sure this is going to work, and if it didn't work, we're not going to just keep on trying because it should have worked. We have to work out why we thought it worked when it didn't, kind of thing. So there's kind of two examples of explore and exploit. So basically, some high impact, high risk activities, some things are more confident, and now coming to the third one, which is not traditionally what some people call it as something to guide your development, is secure. So these are examples where you effectively have money in the bank, as in, because we're a service team, as in we have a live thing that's constantly online. If it goes offline, it stops doing the thing that we designed it to. It stops doing the things that we experimented on. We're now losing money effectively compared to what we could have had, or money or user benefit or whatever kind of thing. So in the secure bucket is of the things that you've done that you don't want to lose, how do you make sure you're not losing them? So in this case, we had some iffiness about whether or not the service that we internally used, this was like about a year ago, whether the service we internally used for getting prices was both worth calling on the homepage, given its value, and two, could we kill it if we accidentally get a spike in traffic over Christmas? So we thought, okay, quite good experiments. Let's run an inverse experiment, as in let's remove a feature, not because we want to, but because we want to know what would happen if we had to. So we actually went into this not planning on keeping any of this stuff. We just wanted to bound kind of the loss. It turns out, and this sometimes happens with secure experiments, it was actually beneficial. The right-hand side, where we didn't show prices, was better than showing prices. Again, with experiments, the tricky thing is why was not totally clear, but we had facts that told us it was actually beneficial. That in a way is that is quite hard to show a secure example. So that happened to be one that we were comparing a visual change with a non-visual change. We've now done this about another 2 times with a bit effectively a system level refactoring, where we were pulling out another layer of where we get these prices from on a different page. And we've also done it where we changed the background provider of directness and indirectness information. In both of those, again, we're not planning on changing anything. It's very easy to go into those with the expectation that you're going to have to do some changes. So for example, in one of these, we were actually introducing an extra hop behind the scene. So we were expecting an increase in latency. Typically, an increase in latency leads to some downside. It turns out, and because you're on it as an experiment and explicitly measuring and not trying to make any changes that we basically not over-engineering and not doing things that we didn't yet know we needed to do, it turns out we didn't need to care because there were other things that happened. So the latency was definitely went up, but other things happened to do with effectively the affinity of the service calls in the background that made a benefit. Because we run it as an experiment, and because we explicitly said, let's look at the business metrics for this technical change, we didn't have to do any of that work, because it turns out overall it didn't have a downside. And the other one was basically another team wanted to move their stuff to AWS from our data centers. We thought that's great. Let's do it as an experiment to make sure that we're not losing anything. We did it for a couple of weeks, not lost anything, can continue on with our lives kind of thing. So the key thing here is, and this will kind of bring up some takeaways. So our thinking is guided by what our expectations are going into these different experiments based on whether we categorize them as explore, exploit, or secure. So with the example of the changing the header kind of thing, we could say, well, actually, we're not planning on keeping this, so don't worry. We're just experimenting to see what will happen. We're trying to learn something. So when we think about it that way, then we don't have to go into a meeting about what the impact's going to be, because by default, we're not going to ship it. We're just trying to learn something. That guides the conversations around this. It also affects how you think about what time you're spending. So going back to the kind of effectively the hack day syndrome, where you do a bunch of necessary work, which would in this scenario is called secure. It's a bit boring. You feel like you want to have a bit of fun, but it's still only one day. You don't get through anywhere near as much of the stuff that is in the explore, exploit category in one day of a hack day. What happens? You hack it. You don't want to lose it. It gets into production. We don't do that anymore. We focus our hack days on the explore area of our work. We expect and almost require that people don't write any tests, because we're going to throw it away. So if you do it that way, you can focus your thinking around your expectations. The other thing to point out here is always be doing a mix of these. So kind of what I was running to there was that you build up pressure if you're not allowing your team to use their creativity to come up with new ideas. And if you try and force yourself, and it doesn't have to be an equal balance, like we happen to try and go 3 ways equal between all activities. But if you're always allowing an idea to have it look like it has a route to production through some budgeted explore activity, then people are less likely to be pissed off that the idea they had in a hack day is never going to see the light of day. Because if you tell someone, oh, well, we'll come to that once we've done all this work, you're never going to finish all of the exploit work. You have to always be doing a bit of both. It's up to you how much time you spend on each activity. It could be 10%, it could be 30%, but you have to always be doing a bit of both. The other thing at the end is that, and this is kind of a trap I think we fall into sometimes in Agile circles, is that if this sounds like something you already know about, that's okay. I'm not trying to invent a new framework here. I happen to like giving a name to it, but as soon as you look, you'll find that this overlaps strongly with things that already exist. The key thing is having this thinking. So if you have an existing thing you have, or if someone's written a book on it, I'm not going to write a book on this, that's more useful to you, then please use that. But the key thing is to keep this thinking in the back of your head, particularly those top 2 points. Questions?
Yeah. Did you come up with those ideas to experiment yourself, or was it ideas by your product managers? I mean, I was saying yourself, I mean, you as a development team.
So this, we're going into some details here. So what we do is a thing called scouting. So basically a subset of the team, which is usually a mix of either, a mix of a data scientist, UX person, myself, PO. We basically spend half an hour a week just looking at the kind of explore area. Now, that's not where those ideas originate, but these people have already been looking into this stuff, and there's explicit effort put into explore those things. But generally, it's a mix between that explicit activity, where we're actively looking to explore, and then the more ad hoc activity of the hack days, where we just say, look, you individually as a team member have a day to do what the hell you like. You do not have to justify it to anyone, but you do have to present it on Monday. So I don't think all the ideas come from those 2 things, but that kind of mix of explicit scouting ahead of a subset of the team and allowing the team to have the creativity that then has a route to production.
Cool. Okay.
Okay.
When it coming up with conclusions or trying to measure how they work, how do you fight the say correlation versus causation. Say for instance, every time you remove the price, it correlates with it works better, but it might be not because the price is not seen, because maybe the call to action is clear. You thought it was because you removed the price, but maybe it's not, of course.
So yeah, so that there's always a trade-off, because basically this is effectively science, and all of the benefits and downsides, as in you can try to produce a clear hypothesis and a clear control and treatment, and you can try to make sure that the thing that wins, regardless of why, is the thing that you ship. And so to some extent, you can be guarded against like the thing that you did, not the thing that you think caused it, not actually the cause. As long as you've got the outcome to ship, it's still a problem, as you still have to go back and say, okay, if I think that's a good thing, then how do I do more of it? Or if I think it's a bad thing, how do I do it? So you still have to go back and try and understand why to guide future experiments. But as long as you're crisp about shipping the thing that you tested, then you don't have to care quite as much.
When you do your explore sessions, for example, the A/B user testing or something like that, how do you limit actually the risk exposure? So basically, do you have a process of agreeing certain kinds of tests, like is this too risky for us or not? I don't know.
So two things. So one thing to be clear is that A/B tests are not limited to explore, as we use them through the whole thing. It kind of just reinforce that point. They use experimentation as a tool across the board. The second part, well, the main question is applicable to all of our experiments. So the way that we generally, the way that we limit risk is using the treatment size, or basically the total size of the experiment. So we can have an arbitrary amount of traffic that goes to any given experiment. So if we have a particularly valuable feature that we don't want to ruin with an experiment, then we can make the balance between having more sessions to get a cleaner signal from the A/B test versus not ruining a known feature. And any given team can arbitrarily make that trade-off.
Okay, that's interesting. Thanks.
Yeah.
So what kind of percentages will you respond to?
What do you mean by percentages?
So then like 10% or 50%?
Of what?
Of the people that you invited or recruited to engage in the experiment.
So that's when it comes down to basically the statistics. So the system we have internally called Dr. Jekyll, it will tell you for any given metric what your sample size needs to be to see a particular change. So there's always, depending on where you're doing it, so the homepage is quite nice because lots of people go to it. Other bits of the website that are more smaller, you need to get more sessions. So what it boils down to is how long you're on an experiment for and what proportion of people see it. And it's effectively, it works backwards, as in plug in some numbers, it tells you here's your effect size. And sometimes, for example, if you want to launch a feature where you can't run it for long enough, then the effect size is not big enough, so you don't bother doing an experiment because you're not going to conclude anything. But the key thing is the stats are telling you this. You plug in the inputs of what you want to run, and it tells you this is your predicted effect size, or predicted power, basically. Does that answer your question?
Could you give us an example, maybe?
Without doing the stats in my head explicitly, no, but the numbers-wise, but basically, so I can maybe run through a procedure. So say if I was thinking of running an experiment on the homepage, then what I would do is I would put in, say, okay, what happens if I sold it to 10% of traffic for 2 weeks? What would my effect size be? Or what would my detectable effect size be? I can kind of ballpark that by saying, well, I think this, say if it's in exploit mode, I might have some idea of how beneficial I think this will be in a particular metric. If it turns out that the only effect I could measure over that period with that proportion of traffic was like either ridiculously good or disastrously bad, then I probably wouldn't run that experiment. So you have to have some guesstimate to some degree of what is the expected effect on the metric that you care about, and then what is your opportunity, depending on where you want to run the website or mobile or whatever, given that, and given that a lot of people also want to run experiments and there's only so much sessions to use, can I run an experiment? Will I be able to detect an effect that I think I'll have, and then use that to guide whether or not you run the experiment? Is that okay?
One last question, I think.
Yeah.
At what stage, like, I mean, how do you categorize as exploit? I mean, based on, like, because it's every idea is going to be new, and at what point of stage that you brand it as it is an exploit category?
There's no hard rule for this. So if anything, there's a bias towards things being talked about as being explore when they're not really explore. They're just things that we want to do, kind of thing. You tend not to find it hard to find exploits, because exploits are basically you've got an existing product and you've got 10 incremental changes you want to make, all of which you think will be beneficial. So if anything, you bias towards exploit. The actual exact determiner of what it is has to be based on something else, either experience or some metric you want to point to, kind of thing. I generally find that I tend to have to pull people towards the explore side of things, because people always produce really in your face, here's the next step on these 5 different areas. You really have to pull people towards saying, well, is this actually really an explore? Sounds just like another exploit to me, kind of thing. I think that's us.
Okay.
So just a quick advertisement. We have a whole ton of things in this area on our Medium page. So if you are interested in the details from more experts than me in the company of how to run experiments down to the maths, we have those. We also have stuff about how to do Scrum, all that sort of stuff. Please go and have a look. Please ask questions.
Thank you, Mike. Thanks very much. Okay, that's us for tonight. At the start, I mentioned about Martin who's running the PSM course in January. That's Martin. He's here now. Yeah. Hello. So, I think we'll. We're finished 9 PM-ish. I think we're on 9 PM-ish, so that's not too bad. So we'll talk about the next meetup and a few other things as well. So next meetup is going to be actually our very first morning meetup. We've not done it before. It's in the morning. It's what's the date again? It's the 13th of December. Early doors, 7:45 kickoff at the Costa at Waverley Mall. You know, top of the Waverley station. Yeah. So if you're up bright and early and want to get together and talk about Agile, first off, we're going to work. Kevin Austin's going to be hosting it, and maybe some helpers as well. 7:45 on the 13th of December. Okay. So we don't normally run an evening meetup in December because 4 weeks from now is kicking on Christmas. So we're up. The next evening meetup is going to be in January. Can't remember the date, but it's in January the 20th something. At Skyscanner. Laz is hosting that one. Ideas, please contact the organisers, LAE organisers, for any ideas on where you want to give a talk or think you'd like to discuss a certain subject. We're always open to feedback and ideas, so please keep them coming. Okay. Anything else on that side? I don't think so. I think I'd just like to say thank you. So thank you to all the speakers tonight. Been wonderful talks. Thank you very much. Thanks to Forge again for the live stream, and hope some folks watching. And also a big thank you tonight to Scott Logic for hosting tonight and the refreshments and pizza. Thank you very much. Thank you for being here. Thank you for coming. It's great to see a good turnout, and have a nice fresh evening. See you next time. Thanks.